talk about the promise made by the hand on the thigh. You can look that up. I won't go into that too deeply because I actually had a Bible study once that talked about how covenants and promises were made, and that was in there. But anyway, let's keep going. And so basically he's saying that he does not want to get a wife for his son Isaac, from the Canaanites. He could, it would have been easier, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted to keep it in the family line, which at this time was completely proper, to make sure, honestly, that there was no crossover with pagan beliefs. This was to keep the bloodline pure, to keep the faith line pure. And so he wanted him to go and, I think he went to the town of Nehor. You see that in verse 10. And so he does go there. Also, there's an obedience here that God is having Abraham follow. Again, not only who, but where he is supposed to pick the wife for Isaac. Because remember, this bloodline is being established through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, anyway, so he keeps going. I didn't do any footnotes in this whole thing because I was so busy reading it and so absolutely taken by it all. And so he the servant, Eliezer, worships God for it. And then he prays for his master. And then when he goes to the town, and he goes to the well. Well, the wells were in the right outside of town, and all the people from the town would come there. And it was probably a social gathering because they had to go get their water daily. They had to water their animals daily, so it was usually very busy. And later in the day, some people say because women were not fit to be seen in public. I'm not seeing that here, even though you got to remember at this time, we did not have, I'm not going to say what we did not have. God has always seen women as equals to men. He made both of us, man and woman. He made us both. But also Eve, after she sinned, was put under the authority of Abraham. And so, I'm not sure, though, that when people say that women were not good enough to be out before the evening to get their water, there's also a lot of research that says women had to carry these very heavy water. I mean, you could only carry back what you could carry for a day, and there was a lot of washings to do, washing people's feet, washing clothes, food, all those kind of things. So they have these big, heavy jars. These were strong women, but it was the heat of the day, so they would wait until it was after the heat of the day, and I believe that more than some of the others. Again, an aside, if you want to research it, you can. But anyway, so this servant, Eliezer, had asked God for a specific sign. Now let me stop and say something about specific signs. This is going to be in parts, I can tell again. Specific signs between us and God are very dangerous because it's where we ask God to prove himself, and we're not supposed to test God. Fleecing is another example that was done in the Bible, where the fleece would be laid out, and if it had dew on it, you go this way, and if not, you go this way. The casting of lots, all these kind of things were ways to hear from God. Here's the best way to hear from God: to know his voice so good that when you pray, you're sure what the answer is. And if you're not, don't move. If you don't have peace, don't move. Sometimes that lack of peace is not because God is saying no, but it's because he's wanting you to come back to him for more time with him about the decision. I know I felt that way about whether or not I was going to be vaccinated, because I was not very trusting of a lot of the information about it. And so I just really had to pray and say, but God, should I be doing this with my body? Should I be doing this as a point of government agreement? Should I be doing this as a point of health? And so I did not have peace, and I prayed and prayed for months, and I did not get it. But then I did, and it's because I got a release from it. I don't want to encourage you one way or the other how God spoke to me on it, but it was my husband who ultimately said, yes, I think we should do this, and out of the authority of my husband, I did it. And I don't regret it. And I don't know if that's why when I got COVID, it was not as severe or not. I don't know. I'm not about to advise you on your health. That's something you have to pray about, and you have to ask your doctor about and pray. But that's just an example where we can pray and pray and pray and talk to God. It's not always an instant answer, and it's not always a vocal voice or a sign like this. But Eliezer said, hey, if if it's the right one, will you make sure that not only when I ask her for water that she gives it to me, but that she offers it for the camels? Because that wasn't common. It was common for her to have offered water if she was at the well for him to drink, but not, especially if he's passing through. This was a hospitality was a very important thing in the Jewish faith, by the way. Hospitality is very big. So offering a drink was big, but a real servant's heart would be to offer more. And that's exactly what happened. She offered water for the camels too. And he is looking for a true servant-hearted person for his master's son. So, and that's what Rebecca ended up being. Not to mention she was beautiful, but she was more beautiful on the inside. So as we go on, that whole thing took place, and you'll see it listed twice. And you're like, did I just not read this? And it's almost like, there you go, over and over and over. When people say, sometimes I just don't get it. Well, sometimes God repeats the important stuff over and over and over to make sure you get it. So I think that must be important, because the story's kind of told and retold. Because once he inquires of God, Eliezer, then he also goes back and says, guess what happened? And he tells the whole story word for word to his master. And you know what? This is when he also goes to Laban. He goes back to Laban. And he spoke very openly about the goodness of his God. And that is in verse... Oh, wait. Well, I'm not going to get there just yet. Actually, you see it... Hold on. Look in verse 34. You'll see. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master abundantly. And he has become wealthy. He's given him sheep and donkeys and silver and gold. And he goes on. He says, my master's wife Sarah was born in old age. And he's given everything he owns. You must not get away from my son from the daughters of Canaan. You must go to my father's house and to my own clan and get a wife for my son. And then I asked my master, and he's telling this all over again. And that's actually that's Laban. That's when he was invited into Laban's house. Then he is telling him the whole story. Y'all, how often do we tell the whole story of what God has done for us, what his goodness is, the things he's spoken to our heart, and we just kind of hold it in. We don't tell that story, and we should. If God's done a great thing, give him glory and praise to others. Are you afraid? Have you ever been afraid? Have you ever thought that maybe somebody will think you're a Jesus freak, or that you're crazy, or that you're overly religious, or they're just going to misunderstand altogether, especially your family? You can't be afraid. Speak with joy, maybe with some brevity, but specifics about what God has done for you. Don't try to tell them what God will do for them unless God gives you a very specific blessing to do so. And I think that's a rare thing. But you can always, every day, tell the story of what God has done for you, and don't worry about being a Jesus freak or overly religious. We are called to go and tell. That is what our life is for, is to spend it for something that will outlast it. Right? We've seen people die in front of us, maybe not in front of us, but in our lives, and it brings us to this point of life. Well, what do we do with life? You spend it for something that will outlast it. Okay, so I'm got to keep going here. So when he finally figures out who she is, he tells them about it. He's bringing her, it's right before he's bringing her back. So she's the daughter of Bethel, son of Nehor, whom Milcah bore. And so the servant puts a ring in her nose and bracelets on her arm. I know some of you think a ring in your nose like a pig or a cattle where they drag them around. I'm not sure it's this ring. It could be this ring. But it is a point of wealth, because he has a gold ring and gold bracelets, and he gives them to her. This is a way of gifting her and giving her beautiful jewelry and articles of clothing. He brings out gold and silver. He gives them to her. He gives out costly gifts to her brother and her mother. This is, I guess you would say, you know how later on it was the woman who had a good dowry. In other words, if you married her, she had beautiful things coming with her into the new marriage family. This is the other way around. They're blessing her and her family. So then her brother says, can we keep her 10 days? And Eliezer says, please don't detain me. You know, this is what the Lord has asked of me. And they said, well, then let's ask her. So do you see right there, as bad as we think women were treated, and they still are today in many aspects, so are children and some men. But he did go to, they did go to Rebecca and say, what do you want to do? They didn't have to, because it was common of the day to have arranged marriage. And she says in verse 58, this is chapter 24, 58, I will go. Okay? By the way, I want you to look back at something with me that I kept noticing. Where is it? Yeah. In chapter 22, look at verse 1, where God tests Abraham and he says, Abraham. And Abraham says, here I am. And then when you look in verse 11, the Lord called out, or it says the angel of the Lord called out to him, and he says, here I am. He always says, I'm right here, Lord. He calls out, I'm right here. I'm right here. I love that. Also, you'll see an interaction between God talking to him and the angel of the Lord talking to him. And so some people in some faiths have said that the angel is Jesus. No, Jesus is not an angel. He's over all the angels, and they worship him. He is the Son of God, and therefore, by nature, he is God. And but the interaction here where you see, and God said, the angel of the Lord said, and God said to him, and he said to him, and the angel of the Lord said to him, where it's used interchangeably. One of the things you got to remember is no one has ever seen God and lived. So often what we will see in the Bible is the angel of the Lord precedes God. So it kind of implies you're not having a face-to-face with God, but God is present, and the angel is the one speaking on behalf, because you can handle that much. I don't know, because to see an angel is pretty frightening as well. It is a supernatural being. Abraham is getting a very special, close, early in humanity relationship with God, that got more and more and more diluted and perverted as time of mankind went on. And anyway, I just wanted to point out that he keeps saying, here I am. And then you get to Rebecca, and she says, and there I go. Here I am, there I go. She says, I will go with him. So obedience, obedience, obedience. Hello, I'm right here, God.